right, I call the special city council meeting for the city of Tomball, Texas to order. We will dispense with the opening ceremonies. At this time, anyone will be allowed to speak during our public comment, receipt of petition time. We'll be able to allow to speak on any matter other than personnel matters or matters under litigation for length of time not to exceed 3 minutes. No council, board discussion or action may take place on a matter until such matter has been placed on the agenda and are posted in accordance with the law. Is there anyone signed up to speak?
I have no one signed up to speak.
Is there anyone here who hasn't signed up who would like to speak on any issue? Okay. Seeing and hearing no one, we are now going to enter into a workshop session to consider the proposed fiscal year 2022-23 budget. David?
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. This is, as you just stated, the second budget workshop that we have scheduled. There's going to be these topics that we're going to go through. Catherine's going to go through the updates from the last budget workshop that we looked at some of the expenditures that y'all brought up, and we actually updated some of the revenues as well. In this workshop, we're going to go through the other funds that we did not get to, the special revenue funds, the internal service funds, and then we're going to get into the capital projects and then the capital recovery, which is our impact fees, and then those projects that are budgeted out of those funds. As we stated, this is the second workshop, and then as you see there, this is the schedule as we go forward. If needed, we do have time and space to add a third budget workshop. Again, if that's only as needed, and then the budget takes effect October 1st. Catherine.
So we took another look at the fiscal year 2022 projections, and these are the noteworthy items that we changed from the first budget workshop. So looking at construction permits, we've had a lot of activity this summer. So we went ahead and bumped up those projections by $175,000. And then for water sales, because of the drought that we're experiencing, we have had an increase in water sales, and there's also a corresponding increase in the regional water authority fee. So that net increase in revenue is $300,000 in our projections. And then we took another look at our fuel, oil, and lubricant expense, and we bumped that up by $65,000, primarily for fleets.
And that does include both general and enterprise funds.
And then we also made some adjustments based off of items that we're learning about for the fiscal year 22-23 budget. So we have received our certified estimate from the Harris County Appraisal District. So we have started working through the process to calculate our property tax rate. So we're in the preliminary stages of that, but we do anticipate an increase to property tax revenue. And then for the item that's going before council tonight for the ISD school resource officers, we adjusted revenue for that. And then on the expense side, one item that was discussed during the previous budget workshop was the license plate reader software that was not previously included, so we added that. And then the stores connections, it was previously $40,000, but to finish out the project, we went ahead and bumped up that expenditure to $65,000 to finish it out. And then also there was an increase for fuel for the fiscal year 22-23 budget, so that estimated about $75,000. Again, it was primarily for the police department.
I'll only note that on the license plate readers, that if you remember recently, we did apply for a grant that would cover that software. And in the event that we do not get that grant, then it's budgeted for next year to be able to still do that project. All right, so diving straight into the special revenue funds, unless there's any questions on the from the first budget workshop. Going straight into this portion, if you remember these special revenues, there are specific revenues for dedicated for specific things that we can expend those in. Hotel occupancy taxes and the different ones that court uses. That's the main ones for the special funds. We did include funds and that's the major grant fund. So that way we can list all of our grants and then the ARP funding. This slide here gives you a fund summary for each one of those categories. The court security fund, you can see there, we don't have anything planned or scheduled for expenditure next year under court security, but there is an expenditure this current fiscal year, and that's the lobby work that's happening now to make to harden the lobby a little bit more. The court technology fund, that one is, what do we have there? Expenditure.
Software.
That's the software that the court uses, and that's the ongoing. We don't anticipate any other purchases out of that fund. And then the child safety fund, that was primarily outreach that gets funded every year for expenditures. That's the educational materials that we send to schools and giveaways that we do to promote the education piece.
Hey, David,
Yes, sir.
I have a question. I was trying to get myself unmuted. Back to the grant fund that we were talking about for getting the license plate reader. If that grant comes through, what happens to those funds that we're allocating now?
Since it's only an appropriation, so if we get those funds of the grant, it just doesn't get expended. And then we put that in the projections to not project to spend those funds.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
All right, and then the other two special revenue funds, we've got the police seizure and the LEOs. The police seizure, you'll see there, and then in the first budget workshop, we talked about improvements to the Malone lot. There is a significant amount of fund balance in that fund that we chose to take $100,000 out of that to help pay for those improvements at the Malone lot, leaving with $18,000 of fund balance at the end of next year projected. And then the LEOs fund, those are funds that are used to help pay for specialized training, or really any training that's above and beyond what we budget. And we don't anticipate diving into those funds as for next year. The HOT fund, that's the hotel occupancy tax fund. That's where our marketing and our grants come out of. You can see there that the fund balance has come back really strong and we project it to be strong for 2023. And that's, we had planned to infuse some of the ARP funding to replace those lost revenues out of the COVID years. We didn't have to do that. So that's still an option if we wanted to add any additional grants or expenditures out of the HOT fund type, so we could replace those funds that we didn't see during the COVID years. Here's the HOT fund grants that were approved by the Tourism Advisory Committee. As you'll see, the ones that we typically see, the ones for the chamber and the 35,000, and you see there, that's what that funds, those different activities. The Sister City Association, the funding is there. There is an increase in the ballet. They're wanting to do additional shows and above and beyond it with the Nutcracker. And then the Spring Creek Historical Association, their normal request of the 30,000, but this year they do plan on doing a car show and wanted some funding for that event. And those did go to the TAC board, and they were all recommended for approval. So that should be coming in the next, not this council meeting, but the next one after this.
David, on the car show, have they come forward to request any like kind to help with traffic during the parade on that antique car show?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't know if, they may be asking for special events where they ask for some in-kind services.
Yeah, not like kind. They can't switch police for police. In kind,
I think, yes.
like kind exchange.
Yes, that can still come later.
In-kind. Okay.
I dive into the ARP fund summary. You can see there that we still haven't expended all of the ones that were allocated for our water meters. The supply chain issues are still trying to get those bought and then paid for. We did secure a grant administrator to make sure compliance with the rules of the ARP funds. And that grant administrator would be paid out of these funds. And then we do anticipate bringing a item to the council so we can appropriate the rest of the ARP funding past this year or and beyond. Any questions on the special revenue funds? Oops. Internal service funds. These are the funds that are created internally that we will take revenue or funding for these funds out of either the general enterprise and hotel tax. And those are the fleet replacement fund and also the employee benefits trust. Here's the summary or a summary of all of the equipment and vehicle purchases for this upcoming proposed year. And you'll see there that we separated out what constitutes a vehicle and what's an equipment. On the vehicle side, what you saw in the first budget meeting, that was all the new vehicles that were proposed. The vehicles that you see here and that we'll go through are the ones that are up for replacement. The total purchase, or you'll see, is going to be the new plus the replacement. That's going to be the total. The caveat there on fire for new, the $900,000 is that new engine that the ESD is going to be funding one way or another, whether it's total funding or a lease purchase type of funding. So under the fleet replacement fund, so this is the summary of what we're proposing to replace, not new vehicles added to the fleet. In general fund is just over $1 million, and in the enterprise fund is $156,000. 9 vehicles, 2 pieces of equipment. And those are what you see there. That's the breakdown of those vehicles. Fund summary for the fleet replacement. You see that the fund balance, ending fund balance projected for 2023 still remains strong. We anticipate to fund the allocations that correspond out of each one of those main fund revenues in order to fund the needs for the fleet replacement. Let's see if I'm missing anything here. The mini pumper, we bought this 22. Yeah. And then going into the employee benefits trust, you'll see there at the ending fund balance for each one of those years, it still remains very strong. We fund the insurance out of this fund for employees. There we have in the budget, in the current proposed budget, a 5% increase. However, after negotiations with the Blue Cross Blue Shield, the increase is going to be 1.5%. So there is a savings there. And then I do anticipate of not pushing any of that increase onto the employees this year. And of course, this does include all of the additional funding for all the new personnel that's proposed in the budget.
Including the SRO.
Yes, ma'am.
David, on that, go back a second. On your deal, when y'all negotiated, they didn't cut any of the benefits by dropping it, did they?
No, sir.
You kept the same benefits you had, and everybody's happy with those?
Yes. So I tell you when we review, because every year when we get the bids in, we review the plan package and we do comparables with other cities about where we land as far as our benefits and our co-pays and what we provide. And it's always been, we do have a very gold standard when it comes to the benefits. We are above really the average of cities in Texas.
Hey, David, that does include the secondary pumper, correct?
On the fleet replacement,
Yeah.
Yes, what we have, let me go back. This is what we had for fire. We have a replacement engine.
Okay,
We purchased the Mini, if you remember this current year.
right.
And then for next year, we do have on the schedule to replace an engine.
Okay, so it's not just another mini pumper, it's a full-blown apparatus.
Yes, sir.
Okay, does that include all decked out with all the equipment necessary?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
How do we? What's the purpose? And I'm not talking about fire or police. But I've noticed this on some of our service trucks within the city. Why do we put such dark window tint on some of those vehicles? And what does that cost?
We can get the actual cost. If I remember right, it's not a high cost to us when we take them to get them tinted
Why do we do it?
for the heat exposure. It's their recovery to get into the trucks, and there may be other reason it's mainly the heat.
So cool that.
Mhm.
Because to me, it just seems like is for some reason we're not being, it's going to seem silly, transparent. Because if somebody's driving around in a tinted out vehicle, more so than I would think would be street legal. Which is what, 20%, I think, something like that. It says a couple things to me. One, the city can do it, but average Joe Blow can't do it. And what are we hiding? I understand the heat thing, but I think to me, it sends the wrong signal. And I would
That's
like
an
us
easy spec to change up to
I
where
would
we go
like
to.
I think we could go to a lighter tint, one that's actually legal. And accomplish the same
Mhm.
thing.
Absolutely, unless there's a specific reason that I just cannot think of, there's no reason why. we
The
can't.
one that I think comes to my mind is that dark truck. And I've seen it several times. It's a black truck.
Okay.
And I mean, you cannot see anything from the outside.
Okay.
And I'm just going like,
Mhm.
why do we do that?
There's not a,
Hey, David, can you give us the cooling ratio of whatever tint we're using now and what a step down would be? Because if it's 10 or 15 degrees differential in how that vehicle is kept, coolness wise, I don't have a problem with them being dark. As you know, that would be the least of my worries. If we've got employees that are problems, you already know who they are and what they are. Deal with that as an employee that's doing things they shouldn't be done. But otherwise, if somebody needs that for heat of a day or heat of an evening, whatever it may be, and I'll speak on this as far as the fire apparatus goes. When you're out there in blistering heat and you get into a cab to cool off to rehab, it sure is nice to be able to step off in a vehicle that's 10 or 15 degrees cooler than it is outside.
Well,
So
and
I just know the difference is.
And I excluded fire and police because one, I hadn't seen it in that. So that was my pre-comment, but
Okay.
this is not
But John, we did that in the oil field. We did for the people that are out there on locations and stuff. You'd have to do a cool down tent or you have to do something. Cause these guys working in 100-degree temperature.
I understand that, but it also says to me that government truck can put whatever dark tint on there and I can go get my truck inspected. And if I have more than 20%, I'm rejected. And so I think we should at least be what is street legal.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And John, I understand and concur with you. like I said, though, if there's a large differential in coolness when we're talking about putting these people out 110-degree weather, and there's a large differential, that I'm not going to have an issue with that. I don't think anybody else would. If you had a personal car that you could put darker on, you would do it too. So I wouldn't for sure.
But that's the point. I can't,
Yeah.
and I don't think we should either.
Drew, did you have a question?
We're good with PD, but our vehicles go through the same inspection.
And somebody's,
So we will check, we will make sure they're correct, and then we'll report back.
do you know which truck I'm talking about?
We have 2 black trucks that were ordered kind of out of spec. There's a history behind it, which before I got here, we'll double check on that tent.
Okay,
PD has the heat readers that they can come by and check the level of it. We'll make sure.
Right.
Darker vehicles, the tent looks darker, especially those vehicles. Came with a-
I couldn't see,
Right.
I couldn't see anybody in there.
Right. No, I mean, it's, and we'll definitely check the concern on the building, but, again,
Yeah, I think
it's an easy.
yeah,
And this is
Sorry.
excluding fire and police.
excluding fire and police. I have not seen that on fire or police vehicles. It's only on these couple of service trucks that I see driving around.
Right, which brings us into our capital fund project. This is a summary on the capital project fund. You can see there that the expenditures for projected 2023, they're at the $30,790,000. That does include that projected CO issuance of bonds for infrastructure, with an ending fund balance still very strong at $7,300,000. The projects that either are new funding this proposed budget or adds to the funding that's already existing there to fully complete that. That's the list here that you see here, that these are the capital funds that have movement in this current budget. The Malone lot upgrades, the $300,000 what we project total. And so that's all being funded this year. Matheson Park included in this is the grants. We got good news from the state level that they're going to start releasing those contracts. So that's good. It fits right in the schedule with whenever school starts back up, we can start that project so we can expend those funds. Museum updates, or renovations there at the depot. The depot is in desperate need of some help out there. So we've got $150,000. I'm hoping that we do not utilize all of those funds, but with it being such a older building, once you start taking out some of that wood, we could find other problems. So we included some contingency in that funding. Our participation in the Juergens Park, that inclusive park or playground that we've been talking about, we did include from the general fund $100,000 to go in that, and then we do have a request to the EDC to add funding from them, and then plus the donations or the campaign that's happening now, we anticipate about $500,000 coming from that. We add some alley improvement funding, sidewalks for continuing that project. The FM 2920 enhancements, we added 50,000. That's really to just cover, to make sure that we maintain our $3 million that we have pledged for our portion to the project. The 50,000 is the contract that we have with Gunda to prepare the alternatives that we're looking at.
And
Hey,
where's
Dave.
sidewalks?
Are you?
Go ahead. Yes, sir.
Over on, I believe it's going to be Oxford and Oak, maybe. There appears to be a lot of sidewalk framing that's going on over in there by the Grays, I believe it's called. Can you give us some kind of an idea? Is that privately funded or is that something we're doing? It looks really nice.
That's all privately funded by the Hudson Group.
Okay.
Where are
Wanna
the
give-
sidewalks you're talking about putting in?
We haven't detailed those locations. We know that there's funding, but there's gonna be some additional discussion about where,
How hard would it be to put it down? I just went blank on the road. Where, over at Baker, over at by the park and the swimming pool and going on down to Fort Zion. Cause I've had several people tell me there are a lot of kids walking on that road trying to get to the swimming pool or trying to get to the park. There's no sidewalks on it. They have to walk on the road. Is that one of the places you'll be looking at?
yes, sir, and it may be a phased approach because I don't know how much right of way we have to be able to put in there, especially because it's open ditch.
Yes, sir.
We may be limited on the right of way, so we might have to purchase some easement to be able to put that sidewalk in there. But that's definitely an area. Another area I know that we've added in the budget last year is funding for the sidewalk at the school administration building to Market Street. That funding is still in the capital project fund. And that one, we've added that project in with the alley improvements because we've got to go for a Harris County permit to be able to go in that. And so we did that so that way we can go to the engineering at Harris County for that and also the little pocket park that's on Commerce and Cherry. We can go to the permitting there, but that's going to go all bid together as a project.
Do we still have sidewalk when people come in to develop and put homes in, that developers have to put in sidewalks?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, but not individual residences?
If they were to build on the, let's say, an infill lot, they're required to put sidewalks in.
Okay, the homes that are close to Oric, that are across from the park. So they did not have to put any sidewalks there.
That's true. There is a option for them to do a fee in lieu of,
Is
and I
that
don't
what
know
they
if
did?
that's what applied there.
Is that what they're doing? There's a new house going up there too. So.
I am not sure. We will check.
There's several.
Right, so right outside the fence,
To
whose
the front.
property is that? Is that our easement right outside the fence of those houses on Oric? Next to the
It-
gymnastics studio?
Could be if it's outside.
Be something to look at, to see what happened there.
Before you get into the enterprise piece of this, is it on our radar anywhere at all about the parking lot where the train museum was gonna be? Because there is not a weekend that goes by that we don't have some kind of vendor market or something like that. I was at one yesterday. And several of them told me they've been waiting to get into the farmer's market, and the list is long. And so both farmer's market as well as German Fest, I've talked to both groups. And having that parking lot back there, and we could do some, it'd be a little more expensive, but do some kind of permeable material that so we wouldn't have to build such big detention would allow parking where farmers market splits that parking lot between parking and farmers market. They could utilize that whole parking lot and parking could go back onto that. And then German Fest also has vendors that can't get in. There's no space. And they feel like they could utilize that as well. Is that on the radar at all?
Yes, sir, it is. And so if you remember, we had talked about that's a potential use for the ARP funds.
Okay,
And so the remaining funds, which are about what, $1 million something, $1.2 million that still need to be appropriated. I know that we had talked about that as a source to, because it definitely helps promote tourism, bringing people to the city and more destination. So it does fit the criteria for those funds.
yeah, German Fest told me, I think, it's been a while, slept since then, but it seems like 75 to 100 vendors that just can't get a slot. And farmers market is, people are on a wait list a mile long. Now, with the farmer's market piece of it, how does that sales tax work with what's done there? Is there, do we get sales tax revenue off that?
We're supposed to, yes, sir.
So not going into how that's done, but expanding that market could certainly help our tax base.
Yep.
So I'd really like to see that.
Well, it just makes it into more of a destination.
Yeah,
People come, it's a draw from the outside.
Well, and also in reference to farmers market, have we considered, at the depot, we have that road that goes up towards the depot, and then we have the concrete slab up there.
Mhm.
Having tents on both sides of that road, and then on the slab, and then the spaces that they would normally be over in the parking lot would open up.
Right.
For a time being. That could be another option.
and you're right on there, because what their position was that if we had that parking lot over there, then it would be a natural flow of start having vendors somewhere like you're saying there on that street and right into that where they are now, that whole parking lot.
Mhm.
And as far back as we want to take them into that parking lot. if we wanted to.
Right. We just have to coordinate with the farmer's market because it'd have to be somewhat interruptible. Because if we have an event that needs to be done there on a Saturday, there's not a whole lot of complex. There's more
Yeah.
complex probably in reservations of the gazebo.
Yeah.
But
Can we not just close that, like Mark's saying, close that street off
Mhm.
there at that four-way intersection by the tax office and just make that part of the,
Well, I don't know if you can close the street, because then you're affecting businesses. And I don't want to affect the business. I was talking about the road that's
the alley,
in the depot.
The little
right
alley.
outside
oh,
the
yeah,
restaurant
yeah.
Is what I was talking
One's back
Yeah.
behind the
Bathrooms.
bathrooms.
Yeah,
about. Yeah. Well, no, the one that's in front of the bathroom. There's that
it's a little,
paved road that goes back up to the depot,
Okay.
and then you have the concrete slab right up there on the left.
Walkway in front of the bathrooms, between
That's
the
good.
fountains and the bathrooms.
It's actually the width of a one-way road.
it's like an asphalt. But anyway, the expansion of that would really be good.
I received some compliments on our diagonal parking that we have over on Commerce Street the other day. And I think any place that we can potentially utilize that diagonal parking on Commerce in and around Old Town, that we strongly look at it, especially if we've got a fairly wide street such as Commerce. But a lot of people that I've heard from and just heard rumors of, people really like the diagonal parking.
Absolutely.
I'll have to consult with my consultant on diagonal parking. So let's move forward when you're ready.
Let's do it.
All right.
Okay, you're consulting with your consultant, sir.
Do we have any other streets wide enough to do it?
Well, you have, like, is it Commerce? Is that, you can only do it on one side.
That's right.
But wow, I mean, and that's what Fredericksburg does.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. It gives you so much more option.
Yep.
And, the businesses, like it because they put their patrons right at their front door instead of a block down the street. So yeah, it's just a win-win for everybody.
Yeah.
No, yeah. No. So I'd like to see it wherever we can do it.
And then for the enterprise fund, we have oh, yes. So those, I forget someone signed it.
Got you off track.
Yeah. So you'll see here some of the projects that we identified that could be paid out of the bond proceeds. And so that way we don't have to take it out of the fund balance. That does help to kind of, it does stabilize our fund balance for the operating funds. The Pine Street elevated storage tank, that's really to recoat that tank and repaint it. So before I get the question, the Baker Street tank, that one is on schedule for September. So we're on the schedule now. The East Water Plant, that one for phase one, really to locate the location for it and do the design for the new well and submit to TCQ for approval. And then the Telge easement acquisition, what we talked about, that truly does complete a loop that we need for the south end of town, but it also adds a tremendous amount of opportunity for future expansion, annexations, all those different things that will be triggered with just having utilities in the area. SCADA, it's an ongoing program to get that updated and up running into all of our utilities. We started with the water. We're going to expand into the sewer and then into the gas. 29 lift station, that's one that's really needed. It's undersized as it sits now. And so with more expansion out there, that's why that's a high priority to get that one done. And then with all of the development, the triggering of the wastewater treatment plant, we're getting ready for that. And this will do a portion of the design for the plant.
Has there been any discussion on making the painting of our storage tanks more aesthetically pleasing, putting artwork, putting sayings, Tomball Hometown with a heart, putting our logo?
That's a very timely question because we just met with Freeze and Nichols. And we did 50% review of the new tank that's proposed, that's going to be built at the Lovett industrial site. And that's one of the topics is what are we going to put on this tank so we can get pricing. And so we told them, we don't know yet. That there is going to be something, it's a great opportunity to do something really neat. Of course, once you get into a lot of colors and intricate art on it, the price goes up. And then really we have to look at, see where they can be visible from. And then we've included a lighting package on that tower. So it's going to be really neat, but we do need to formalize a process on how do we determine what's going to be on the tank.
Right. And anything we do for a little bit more money for 20 to 30 years of aesthetically pleasing identity is something we need to think about on any project that we do in this town.
So as we said now,
Go ahead.
no, I was just going to say just that what we have planned is look at different options, look at what other cities have done, and then bring back to you a narrowed scope, because if we just try to do it, just wide open, there's so many ideas out there that we'll never come to a consensus.
We need to take a break.
Go ahead, Councilman Townsend.
More than just a bump in the road, Tomball Hometown with a heart.
More than a bump in the road?
That's what I said.
Please tell me that was never our motto. It's like I never remember that.
I think it should be our motto. We're more than just a bump in the road. Hey, good anesthetics.
All this slide is doing is just showing you the funding sources that we are utilizing to get to the total to pay for all these projects. And we're trying to really look hard and distribute these and find revenues wherever we can to pay for this. It's not just a one funding source recommendation.
Question. On the water tower, is that outside only that we're working in? Or is there something done on the inside?
Oh, for the Pine Street elevator tank, it's both internal and external.
Okay. What are the conditions inside of those tanks? Do we know?
Yes, we do an annual inspection every year. There's a video. They do a different testing on the thickness of the coatings. And they look obviously for anything on the inside for corrosion and things like that. The tank has performed really, really well for these many years, but it is time now that we're starting to see corrosion. Having reviewed the videos or any of the inspection report, there's always upgrades the TCQ requirements for man access and safety harness that get
Yeah.
upgraded. And so those upgrades, at some point, we have to get that fixed too.
Is there any room in the budget to address water quality?
Yeah.
Water in terms of taste and smell,
You mean what comes from that well?
not that well, just taste.
Just in general, the taste.
Yeah.
We can definitely do a study, because I'd have to drill down about what's causing. And so since our water is all groundwater, and it really, once we get it pulled up, we disinfect and then we distribute.
Right.
And so that's the reason why we had the Baker Street well. It did have taste and odor with H2S.
Yeah.
And so there's,
I'm not talking about that piece of it, but it just, I think the water can taste better. That's just a personal thing on my part, but I've heard other people voice that too. So I'm just wondering if there's something.
there's
Well-
actually definitely different things that we can do, we can look at, because there's different things. It could either be the water supply, it could be the distribution the system itself. Residuals in different zones in different areas of the city, so we definitely can look at that.
Okay. What about, or is there any kind of acceptable algae levels or anything in that water? Is that there
There
is? Because, and the reason I asked that is I was witness to, we had to, because of a quality issue with the foundation of our pool there at Sports Med, we had to drain the pool. And we had to fix it and then refill it. And when we refilled it, it was green. And this is right out of the tap. And you can't see it in your glass, but you certainly can see it against a white background, which is the plaster in the pool. And so I just wondered,
Was it algae or metal? Did they
I
put
didn't-
metal hole back in it to get rid of it? Or they put?
no, they put a lot of chlorine.
Yes, and there is an acceptable level of organics in the water. And then a lot of that does come from the service lines in a lot of the main lines too. And that's why we do have a campaign to flush the system as much
Yeah.
as possible,
Yeah.
because there is growth and buildup.
Yeah, it wasn't sediment or anything that I could see. It was just a nice green color. And so I just wondered if partly that was the taste issue that I have with it. It's obvious to me when I go to a restaurant in town, and if they have filtered water, you can, or if they serve tap water, you can tell.
Yeah.
And I just wondered if there's
Well,
any wiggle room.
We've noticed over on this side of town, a lot of corrosive buildup, and it appears to be mainly calcium on our faucets.
Yeah,
No matter whether you're running a brass faucet or a stainless steel or whatever, you've got a fairly large accumulation on most faucets on this side of town. I'd like to see what's going on with that, and if there's anything we could do to reduce that corrosiveness, because faucets are not cheap anymore. Cheaply made, yes, but not cheap.
If you go softer, then you got that whole problem with what it's gonna do to everybody's pipes.
Yeah,
And I don't think we want to go down that road.
no, we don't.
If we can take some of the sediment or some of the paste, whatever, I think that would go a long way.
Okay.
Just a thought.
Do most of our commercial restaurants, do we require that they put in a water filter, or does the water board, the inspection?
The health permit.
Health inspection, do they require? I know there's companies that do that a lot in Harris County. In any restaurant or anybody that serves the public requiring water filters.
Don't know if
Commercial-grade
it's
water.
an actual requirement, but I know that certain manufacturers for different, like the soda machines,
Mhm.
they recommend a certain amount of filtration. So they may just be doing it ahead of that.
But as long as they pass the public health inspection with the county in our city, then we really cannot require any type of water filter on a commercial establishment, as long as
That
they're
I can
passing. the-
Think of, no.
Maybe we need to look at the public health department.
Yeah,
Do
I don't know.
do
what
y'all have that at the hospital or?
the- No, there's not a requirement.
Okay,
We have the same.
okay. Just curious, thank you.
Randy, did you have a question about the alleys?
I just was wondering if we wanted to revisit the improvements to the alleyways. And seeing the funding mechanism, it's not that big of a concern now.
Okay.
Okay. And then going into the impact fees or the capital recovery funds. This one is the first of the water. And here we are using capital recovery funds to pay for the city's portion of the elevated storage tank at Lovett at about $3.5 million for that tank. And if you remember, the development agreement with Lovett is that they would pay for half of that tank. And so the projected cost of the tank total is about $7 million.
Will that one be aesthetically pleasing? Are they going to want to put something on there like a Macy balloon or something?
No, that's our tank.
That's okay.
I heard they were gonna write love it or leave it. No, okay.
You'll see there, the projected fund balance is still at $1.3 million, so we could still do a good sizable project with the remaining funds. Under sewer, we still have we're growing that fund balance for projected next year. The only thing we have there is to finish the Rudolph Road sewer line extension. This will be a first-time service for that area, so it's that will finish that project up.
How many of the people along Rudolph are anticipated to tie into that line?
Current customers to tie in, Megan, do you remember? There's probably but I'm further north, Mr. DeLeon and all of those, they weren't going to tie in. So there is a potential of existing customers, 5 or 6, but there's a lot of property that isn't developed that probably would with utilities.
You've got a new house going in on Rudolph Road right now. Would they be ones that would tie into it that wouldn't have been tied into it before? Probably?
Correct. They're looking at doing a septic, I believe.
Is there going to be a requirement that any existing properties tie into it somewhere down the road?
Yes. That if they ever have to replace their septic unit more than 50%, if they have repairs that cost more than 50%, then that will trigger, they tie into our system. But right off the bat, as you know, day one, no,
But new build does.
new build does.
Okay.
And they want to, they would,
Sure.
they would not want a septic. So there's the total cost on the far end of what the project is going to cost, and then what the funding is for this year.
When is that tower supposed to be complete?
It was a 3-year,
2024.
Okay,
2-year.
got it.
Roads, maintaining roads, upgrading roads. Persimmon, what are we talking? I know what, it's on the budget, so I'm not bringing that up, but I'm talking about widening it or doing something with the ditches or something like that. Should we talk about that tonight or can we talk about that now? Since it's on the agenda. I mean,
Absolutely, you can, I think you can talk about it now.
Okay.
It's one of those
are
that,
do we have any money that could actually widen that? Or, is that, I drove it today, was coming down and it's still narrow, so.
yes, it is still narrow. The asphalt project that we did as part of the drainage did widen it just a tad bit as far as we could. we widened it, but it's still narrow. So when we
Taking
talked
Derek-
about,
I'm gonna take up Derek's one that talked about paving over something downtown, you know, when they're talking about either doing a cement job or paving it. And he said paving doesn't last long enough to even make it worth it. And is that what we're doing now, putting a Band-Aid on this?
with the anticipation that we need to do a major CIP project and do the widening and so.
Make it like the southern.
Make it like the southern section, yes. Sir.
When would that be on the plan? Do we have the money to do that?
So as we talked about in the first budget workshop, we have all these plans that we want to fund. So the master thoroughfare plan, we identify all of the different thoroughfares about where is the highest priority. That can really guide us about, list out all of the different areas that we need to do upgrades. And then we can program in the funding. And so the funding, we're talking about just, so it's comparable, that south end was about a $24 million issue to do all of that. And to run north, it's may not cost as much of that, but it's going to be close to that. So when we're talking about those type of capital projects, it needs to be on a funding program. And that funding program, to me, needs to look a lot like, oops, put me back on. Where you saw all of the different things that we utilized in order to fund the capital projects. We need to be able to tap into all of those. The debt is a big piece of it, but we need to be able to look at all different revenues to be able to fund that, a program like that. And that's where it would fit. So first, we need to identify using the master plans that we are asking for the upcoming year. That will list out the priorities. And then we get the cost associated with those priorities, and then we program them over time that we can then establish a good finance plan in order to pay for that. And then we can get it going.
And another thing everybody needs to realize is that when we improve that roadway for Simmons, and any approaches there too, you're going to increase the amount of development in that area significantly. So how much is too much to bring development over there to be able to be handled by what we've got existing? Do we start from 2920 and go south to get to, you know, where we are now on the north approach to Persimmon and Medical Complex, Ag Road? What's the best way to go about developing that so that we don't just flood that area, no pun intended, with more vehicles than they can handle?
Well, so we have Raven Reserve coming in
That's what.
at a breakneck pace.
Yeah.
And sooner or later, those folks in the back or the west side of that subdivision are going to start using Persimmon a lot more to get into town.
Agreed.
And I'm afraid at its current level, it's not going to
That's
stand
what
up.
I drove, that's why I came to look
Yeah.
today before I came here. There's not I don't believe there's an exit out of Raven Reserve onto Persimmon.
Yeah, there is.
Oh, there
Yeah,
is?
there's one. There's
I
one.
couldn't find
Yeah,
it.
there's
I didn't
one.
see it.
There's one. And
Small.
What's that there?
I said it's a fairly small roadway.
Yeah.
There.
I didn't
It's
see
not
it.
it's not a boulevard or anything like that by any
Yeah.
stretch.
they've had a barrier up there partially. You can still get in there. So what is the timetable for that? Because the citizens down Lizzie Lane and those areas have certainly voiced the need and the want for that.
Well, they've paid their dues too.
Yeah, so what,
And we probably should be talking that when they're here, so they can hear
well,
us talking about it.
it just needs it. So what is the timetable?
And so really the timeframe needs to be, we need to do the engineering so we can get good cost estimates. And then, because it absolutely sounds, and you're right. Because you can approach it two different ways. One is to help spark development and so you build it first and then they'll come. Or if you're behind the curve and it's a warranted thing and we're trying to play catch up. And that's where I think we're kind of in the middle with that section of Persimmon.
Agreed.
The thing that concerns me the most is the intersection with 2920.
Yes.
Amen.
And so
So I mean,
that's,
That's dangerous.
that would have to be addressed really, I think, before you can do anything to improve that
But it
road.
needs to be addressed because that's a dangerous intersection. All Concordia is coming out now doing that.
Yeah,
It's
and
a
there have been
state road.
discussions on that.
Yeah, but
um,
but,
that
okay.
are getting ready
It's state
to
law.
happen.
Yeah, I think we can get the state involvement on that. I'm sure that,
Since they're gonna be doing it, they'll come and do it.
Well, I mean, if you're talking about putting up a light, it's a state.
I don't know if you'd ever get a light there. or not.
yeah, it'll meet the warrants. It'll definitely meet the warrants. I have
think
no
that-
doubt in my mind.
As part of TechStot's, in that discussion with TechStot on the road and coming across there, that there are some issues of slowing down speed limits and increasing school zones that have been on the calendar, hopefully to be discussed in the future. And that I think Kyle was part of that too, and what he's getting together, correct?
Yeah, well,
Right.
I'm just gonna be real interested to see how you design that intersection.
no, it's gonna take a,
Start a lot further back to get up to grade.
We're just
you
slowing
got,
the
you got a grade
cars
there.
down will help.
But kudos, because that drainage is so much better.
Yeah, I've heard.
it definitely needed that outfall. There
So
was no-
that, those excess funds you took off of South Persimmon and put toward that, man, that's gonna make such a big difference.
So Councilman Ford, what we can do in the immediate, I can work with Kyle and see if we can't do a very, very high level feasibility about what it would look like to do that section of and identify for sure, because the tie into TechStop's going to be a big one that's going to affect our timeline. There is a transmission line for Centerpoint that we have to avoid, so the alignment have to change. And so then
Yep.
there may be some damaging of property. So I want to maybe bring to you a proposed alignment and identify some of these big
Yes.
time meters and
Yeah.
money meters.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So that way we can keep it
We need
going.
to start looking at it real
Okay.
hard.
We can do that.
And David, on Persimmon, we're putting in the asphalt. That's on the agenda tonight.
Yes.
And if it will attract more development, and then it's a possibility maybe with having a partnership with whatever development may come through, that they can help pay for some of the improvements. Is that a possibility?
There is, we have to be careful with that because there's the law of proportionality to where they can only provide to an offsite improvement just what their impact is. So we can't ask a new business to say, you're gonna build this section of the roadway, the total width. We can't necessarily do that. They will be able to fund a portion of it. Another way to look at it is maybe in establishing a street impact fee. And so they pay a portion and it goes into that, so we can have that funding whenever we go into issue debt. And so development pays for part of that, for
About
new
sidewalks.
extensions.
And or a park impact
And
fee
then-
on every
then there's-
development that
There's
includes
all
that.
sorts of different fees you can have.
you might be able to make contact.
Go ahead.
Uh-oh.
Derek, you push the button.
You muted, you're unmuted. Thank you.
Approach TSID.
Pardon?
You got muted there. We didn't hear any of your statement.
I'm sorry, I had a phone call coming in from a telemarketer. They don't understand when I'm in council meetings, not to interrupt me. No, that we might be able to get a hold of Tomball Independent School District and ask for them maybe to help pitch in some funding for that roadway, because that could be a potential exit for them on the backside of their property there.
I wouldn't ask for a dime.
Okay,
Well, we do, I think the sidewalks need to be part of that because you've got
Right.
sidewalks built into that intersection at Medical Complex, Ag Road and Persimmon, and there are sidewalks to nowhere. And so, and that includes going south.
yep,
And so I think we did put a sidewalk on the newest extension of Medical Complex, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
On one side. So I'd just like to see that not forgotten.
Okay, now I got another question. What about a restroom on the north side of 2920? Has that ever been thought about again?
Yes, sir.
Last meeting.
Over by
Yes, and
Cisco's.
so our thought with that is to incorporate that with the alley project. And that funding, we did anticipate asking the EDC to pay for that piece of the project.
Would it be what, at Commerce and
It may have to take up some parking spots that we have in that lot and
why
build it
not,
on
why
that
not
end.
do it right across?
No, I'm sorry. And then in the pocket park was another, you're right.
Yeah.
We did look at possibly
Well, I was talking to
locating
you
something
about
there. Yes.
Across from Cherry Street Antique, next to Cisco's where Old City Hall was.
Yeah,
Yes.
and make it look like you were talking about on City Hall.
That would be cool.
Yeah, that'd be great.
'Cause we need one there on that side of town. 'Cause when you have your deals, everybody walks from the ballparks down there and then they want to go into one of the stores. And they don't want them
No, I get it.
to.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'll be quiet.
No, ask any questions. Catherine's ready to answer them. And Kristen, sorry.
Wow. Proper delegation right there, ladies and gentlemen.
Hey, you want to continue on? Any other questions on capital project fund sources?
I think that's it. We covered the impact fees and yeah, we're down to questions.
That's all mine.
Any questions concerning the budget?
But then mine.
All right. Well, we appreciate the attention, the questions for sure. And now our charge is to get all this done.
Piece of cake.
All right, well, no other questions, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn our special city council meeting dealing with the budget.
Second.
I'll call for the voting. Oh, any discussion? Call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Down to make sure you try that other link to get into the regular.
We are adjourned.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. See y'all at 6.